Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to episode number 15 of this CQRS course. In this episode, we are going to see how we can unit test our, different parts, different components of our CQRS pattern implemented using the MediatR library. So let's get to the notes. By the way, I assume you're already familiar with unit testing, the concepts, the libraries, the tools, with integration testing as well, because in the next episode, we're going to talk about integration testing. If you're not familiar with these topics, I highly recommend watching some of my courses about these topics. Anyway, unit testing with MediatR. So we are going to see how we can write some unit tests for the different components in our application, which is using the MediatR library. And unit testing, as you know, unit tests focus on testing one unit of code. And that unit of code could be one method, could be one scenario. So unit doesn't necessarily mean one method, right? One unit of work, one unit of code, one meaningful and valuable unit of code that deserves being tested. So first off, I'm going to talk about testing command handlers. So to unit test a command handler, we typically want to isolate its logic and verify that it is correctly interacting with its dependencies, like the fake data store in our example. So one of the dependencies of our handlers is the fake data store. It could be a repository, it could be an application service class. So first off, in our unit testing thing, we are going to isolate that handler, and we want to make sure that that handler is interacting correctly with that fake data store. Because we want to isolate things, isolate these dependencies, we are going to use a mocking library, and in this case we are going to use mock, or mock-q as it is sometimes called. This helps mock the dependencies. So mocking is a very important technique when it comes to unit testing. It helps you to isolate the dependencies, or to mock, or to provide mock versions of the dependencies of the unit of code that you are going to test. Why do you need to do that? Because if you want to be able to truly verify whether that unit of code is working correctly, you need to isolate that unit of code from its dependencies. So if you don't do that, you cannot verify truly that the code is failing, that the test is failing because of that unit, because of a failure inside of that unit of code. Maybe those dependencies are not working correctly. But when you provide mock versions of those dependencies, you can be 100% sure that the test is failing because there is something wrong inside of the unit that you are testing using your unit test. So yeah, that is the idea behind mocking the dependencies. And in order to mock the dependencies of our handlers, we are going to use mock, or mock-q as it is sometimes called. By the way, I am going to use XUnit as my library, as my testing framework. There is also the possibility of using MSTest and unit, but in this specific case, I am going to use XUnit. So basically what we need to do is to create our test project, right, using XUnit test project template inside of our Visual Studio, and then we're gonna add a reference to our web application. The test project needs to have a reference to our ASP.NET Core application, because our handlers that need to be tested reside inside of that application. So inside of my project, if I go to episode 15, you will see that I've got this test project. If I go to the dependencies projects, you will see that I have like a reference to my web application, and I've got these different test that I'm going to talk about. So again, if you take a look here, you can see that I've got, my project reference and I've got my packages installed, right? So we've got our, mock queue, we've got our XUnit runner, and the other things that we need in order to be able to unit test our, handlers. And again, this course is not about unit testing. I just added this unit testing section as a bonus because I wanted this to be a complete thing. I'm a big fan of unit testing and integration testing. I think that it is a very important part of every project. And when I was, creating this project for this course, I thought to myself, why not talking about unit testing handlers as well? But if you are interested in learning the different topics related to unit testing, you can check out some of my other playlists, on the channel. So yeah, this is the unit testing project. The packages that I've got here, my project reference to the web API project, and now we are going to see how we can test the different handlers. So yeah, write unit tests. Create a test class for your command handler. Add employee handler tests. So basically what I have done is that I have created different test classes using the name of the command, for example, or the command handler, or the notification handler, for example, or the query handler inside of this, project. So this is the add employee handler test. So we've got this command called add employee. We've got a handler for that command, add employee handler, and now we've got a test for that handler. So back to our note. In this example, we mark the fake data store and verify that add employee method is called exactly once with the correct employee object when add employee handler's handle method is invoked. Take a look here. I'm going to talk about what I have done here. So basically, what I have done is that I have created this test method, right, using the fact attribute, and then the name of the method, the test method, needs to be very descriptive. It is called handle valid command adds employee to data store. And if you recall, our handler for this command had a dependency on the fake data store. And as I talked about this, when it comes to unit testing, you need to mark your dependencies because you need to verify, you need to be sure that if the test fails, it is not because of those dependencies. It is because there is something wrong inside of the unit that you are testing. So in this case, we are testing one unit. I told you, a unit is not necessarily a method. It could be, in this case, it could be a handler. So a handler has a handle method. Right now, we are testing a handler for a command. So this is the unit we want to test. But this unit has a dependency on a data source, data service, fake data store, right? We want to mark that because we want to be sure that we are only testing that unit, that handler. If we don't mark that dependency, we cannot be sure that the test is passing or failing because of the behavior of the handler, because of the functionality that we have implemented inside of that handler. But by marking this, we can be sure that that dependency is marked, and now if the test fails, it is 100% due to some errors inside of that handler code. So in order to mark our dependency, we are going to make use of mock or mock queue. This is a library. Of course, there could be other options when it comes to mocking dependencies. This is one of the most popular ones. There is another one called nsubstitute. You can take a look at that one as well. Anyway, so I've got this interface, and in order to be able to mark your dependencies, it is recommended to create interfaces for those dependencies. So programming against interfaces helps with testability of your application. right now for the fake data store, I have a dependency, I have an interface, and I am going to mark that, interface, and I'm going to capture that marked version inside of this marked data store. And then, of course, I am going to, create the handler that I want to, test, right? And that handler needs like a data store. In this case, I am going to, pass in the data store that I marked here, right? And then I am going to create an instance of my command. Add employee command. I'm going to add one employee, right? Here, and then my cancellation token. So this is, as it is sometimes called, this is the arrange phase of a test. We've got three phases, right? Arrange, act, assert, triple A's. And then inside of the act, I am actually going to invoke the code that is responsible for testing the thing that I am going to test, which is the handle method of my handler, and then I pass in the command as well as the cancellation token. And then what I want to assert in order to make sure that the handler is working correctly with the command is that, when I call this, right, when I call this, I want to make sure this is an assertion that I am, using on that, marked handler, on that marked, data store. So on that marked data store, I am verifying that the add employee method, which is inside this data store, it is being invoked only once using this employee. This employee has a name, right, which is called test employee, which is coming from here, right? So basically, as I told you, you must be familiar with the concepts of testing, marking, dependencies, assertions, arranging a test. But the main idea here is that we are creating a fake version of our, data store. Then we are creating our command and our handler. We are invoking the command using one simple, employee, and then we are going to handle that. And then inside of the handler, whenever the handler is called like this, we want to make sure that the method inside of this, fake data store has been called only once. Now let's move on to the notes and talk about testing query handlers. It is basically the same thing. So now we have talked about, testing the handler for the command in depth, right? So I think right now testing the testing the handler for the query is going to be very easy for you to understand. So again, I've got my test method, I've got my arrange section, my act, and then my assert. Again, as before, I am creating a mock version of my data store. And by the way, if you are interested in knowing about this, take a look. This is the fake data store. Inside of this data, we didn't have this, right? If you take a look here, if I go to episode 14, take a look here, we didn't have that interface. So in order for the unit testing to work, I have created an interface of this data store. So if this was a repository, I would have created an interface for that repository or for that application service that is communicating with the repository. So one other thing that I want to point out, right now inside of this, for example, add employee handler that we just tested, we are taking in a dependency on the concrete type, fake data store. But if I go to branch 14, 15, right now, we are taking as you can see here, we are taking a dependency, we are creating a dependency on the interface, not on the concrete type. So having interfaces, making your dependencies based on the interfaces, not only makes your code more flexible because you can register other implementations for this interface inside of your application, inside of your IOC container, but also it makes the code more testable. So if, for example, you don't use interfaces, you cannot mark the interface, mark that dependency, mark that concrete class. You can mark an interface and you can set up that interface, the different methods inside of that interface, but you cannot mark the different methods of a concrete type. So let's talk about this now. So this is something I wanted to point out. The fact that I have created this interface, the fact that right now my handlers are creating their dependencies based on this interface, not on the concrete class. So let's talk about this. The next step for us is to create this, collection. So it is called expected employees, a list of employees with 2 employees, ID1, ID2, right? Test1, test2 as the name. And then this is the way to set up a mock version of your data store. I am setting up a method called getAllEmployees, which is defined on my fake data store. I am basically telling mock or mockQ to do this whenever this getAllEmployees is invoked. I'm telling this to mock. I'm saying, I have this mock version of my dependency, right? And there is this method on that interface that you've marked called getAllEmployees. And what I want you to do, I want to set up this method for me, right? I want to set up this method. What I want you to do is to return this expected employees list whenever this method is called. It is called whenever getAllEmployees is called. I want you to return this list that I've defined here, right? And so this is the setup of our dependency, the mocked version of our dependency. And then as before, what I am going to do is to create our handler. I'm going to pass in the mock version of my data store. I'm going to create my query. I'm going to create my cancellation token. I'm going to handle the query, and I'm going to capture the result that this handler returns inside of this object, which is a list of employees. And then I am going to assert that the expected employees, which is this, is the same as the result. Also, I can verify something else. I can verify that in my fake data store, the method getAllEmployees is invoked only once. So there are 2 assertions in this test method. This is something that is possible. I mean, you can write more than 1 assertion inside of a test method. Sometimes it is advised against, sometimes it is possible. It is like, it depends on your requirements. But it is totally fine to have more than 1 related assertion inside of 1 test method. So yeah, to the notes, testing behaviors often involves testing their cross-cutting concerns. For logging behavior, we can verify it logs messages before and after the delegate is called. So this is a little bit, complicated. I don't want this video to be too long. I will probably talk about it a little bit. I've got a test for notification as well. Do I? Yes. So testing notification handlers, testing behaviors. I don't have the code here, but I'm going to add this to the project. I will probably not talk about this because I told you I don't want it, the video to be too long. But maybe I will talk about it in the next video. I'm not sure. But about the notification, right? So again, the idea is kind of the same. Basically, the fact attribute, and then we are going to do what? We are going to create our mock version. We are going to passing this mock version to our email handler. We are going to create an employee. We are going to create our notification, passing in that employee as the input parameter for that notification. We are going to create the cancellation token. Then we are going to handle the notification using this syntax, right? So this is the notification that we've got. And then what we are going to verify is that this method event occurred of our fake data store has been called only once, right? With this employee, right? And with this email sent string. This email sent string is something that is hard-coded inside of the handler for that notification. And this employee, of course, is what we have created here, right? So basically what we are testing is that whenever we've got an employee with a certain name, whenever we invoke the notification and we handle that notification, right, we want to be able to verify that this method on our mocked version of our data store has been called once with a specific input parameter. The first input should be the employee that we mocked. The next input should be email sent. And that's a wrap for this video. I hope you've enjoyed watching it. This video is a bit long, 20 minutes almost, but I think it was very important to see how we can write some unit tests for our CQRS implementation. We're not finished yet. I told you I'm going to add in the code for the integration testing, for testing the behavior, and I will probably talk about it, but the next video is going to be all about writing integration tests. So yeah, let's continue in the next video. Bye-bye.